As we push into, what is this, May of 44, I guess a couple of things happened. The Brits did their election, you know, get it out of the way. They won't have to do one for quite a while. The U.S. is going to have to do one in November, December. And it's not a big deal, but one thing it allowed them to do was to trigger Argentina by firing the Germans off first, which I didn't mark there. I got them off of the German space and into the Japanese control. I consider that kind of important because now Chile and Argentina can't operate together. The German Navy that's based in Argentina doesn't have to leave, but it can't keep basing there. So it's going to cause some problems for the Germans because Germany and Japan do not have an alliance, which means we can't use the Argentine base. And they'd need a pretty significant level of alliance to be able to cooperate to that extent, if they'd be allowed to anyway. I'm not sure if a different country controls, if you're not co-belligerents, I don't know. I just don't know, and I don't really care. I'll fudge things as I can. The Germans kind of wanted to call Chile and Argentina in this turn, but they didn't quite have enough money to do both. I spent too much on production. I didn't have to. I didn't realize it until too late, and screw it, man. Anyway, that's going to cause some problems. I also didn't have enough money to give to the Japanese so that they could bring Mexico in. Not that I really want to do that right away, but that is definitely a goal in the future. The weather's going to be fine to begin with, and I think that's about all I have to say. You know, I mean, we got screw-ups on both sides, so what the hell, you know, at this point. Often feels to be the case in this game. The Axis turn was a big fat nothing. For the Japanese, they took, I think, I don't know, a combined move and ended up only doing the air portion of it. I had nothing I want to do. I mean, I moved some land units, but I honestly have nothing I want to do navally, because while I could set up for another bomber run here, I'm more interested in keeping the U.S. out of supply. That ties up the, you know, the bulk of the U.S. fleet. So if I can prevent the supplies from cutting through, I don't want to commit my Navy or any significant portion of it to do anything else. So they're going to await that. You might say, well, what about a land attack? Yeah, a land attack would make sense, but I don't have a fighter cover over here to launch air attacks anywhere except way over here where the Russians don't have any air support. And they really ought to get some... The problem is the Japanese could make a raid on Ulaanbaatar if I use that as my base, and I have no base that can protect this hex other than that. So I keep running bombing raids out there, but they keep failing and not getting me any ground. And likewise, I did my bombing raids here in the Philippines, and again, they failed. They're not good bombers, but that's okay. It's all I've got to do. I did do a naval move. I moved a convoy point somewhere, I think. I moved it out here in case I want to, well, in order to get supplies to this plane. For the Italians, they also did a combined, did some useless bombing raids. The Germans took this huge bombing activation. They just took a full air activation, and they failed completely. They flipped one unit, but they lost some fighter cover, and they're in a lot of trouble back there. I may want to recover some units, though. And likewise, over here in Spain, they failed completely. In Sweden, their planes weren't close enough, or in Norway, their planes weren't close enough to do anything, so they moved them into range. And that's really about it, you know? I mean, it's like, if I do a land action, I will not succeed because the units aren't flipped and I can't take them out of there. I don't care how much air power I have. You know, it doesn't help when I'm using it just as ground support. It's pretty damn crappy for that. So unless I get the ground strikes in, I kind of get no attacks. Well, in this case, I got some success. This is a white bordered unit, so it's going to be tough to dislodge. but the U.S. won't be able to recover it because the headquarters is down here. If they had the headquarters up here, this would have been a pointless attack, because then I flip the headquarters and hey, it's, you know, back and healthy and everything's screwed, you know, right? So that's kind of what's happening, is everybody's drawing a big fat nothing. And the Allies are probably afraid to move much too. The U.S. is going to have to try to get supply back, but they don't want to do it early in the turn. They want to do it late in the turn, when the turn might end and they're not risking their navy to defend the supply line. Because, as it stands right now, this supply line is actually at risk. This could be cut. But let's say it is cut. Well, then the U.S. could run a second supply line up this way. So, you know, if the Japanese put any effort into crushing something that maybe isn't necessary, the U.S. can then run a line in a different direction. And there's just something that feels really funky about the way it all works. Anyway, there's just so many places on the board where nothing can seem to happen. The Russians demonstrate the hopelessness of using an air action to soften the enemy up first. They have headquarters in place. They were able to recover some of their forces. Enough that, you know, whatever gain was made has been negated, basically. Similarly, I'm looking at the U.S. position. They don't have the kind of force to guarantee their supply line to truck. The Japanese can disrupt that pretty much no matter what. I have a couple of carrier groups, no heavy ships left, and I'm just not going to be able to get it. I might be able to slink down through here, but in doing so, the Japanese could still disrupt that with a couple of ships or whatever. Another alternative would be to try to launch an attack right against Japan itself. Say, screw it to what I've got, but then I'm exposing my entire fleet to the Japanese fleet and letting it get destroyed, and probably not defending these. Now, of course, if the Japanese only send like a ship, they probably won't find the convoy to destroy it, but it's a heavy risk to put in mind. And the multi-layered threats are causing problems that are greater than a World War I type situation. Nobody can do a damn thing. Like I said, the Russians, you know, recuperated, but for the U.S. and the Brits, they really don't have a lot of capability to do much. The U.S. did a combined move this time to sail some units in. In terms of naval actions, again, there's this, I'm afraid to do anything because the other person can react. You know, being the second guy to commit your navy is the big deal. And the U.S. obviously cannot. The Brits have a bunch of naval force. They have a huge navy here. They could easily divert part of it, but it can't do much. They kind of want to leave it to the end of the turn, because if it's all available and the Germans sail out, they can wipe the German navy out. But if it's not all available, and the Germans maybe scatter their subs or send their units out somewhere, then it becomes a trickier situation where they've got to actually hunt things down. So what we're kind of getting to is a point where everybody's kind of in a Mexican standoff, waiting till they think the turn's going to end, and then they'll try to do something, right? Now, the Germans are going to be able to continue advancing in Spain, but you know, it is slowed down. The air power didn't work, and now we got some worse weather again. That's kind of a rarity at this time of year, but the Mediterranean's clear, so we'll be able to fight there. So we'll probably see a German ground phase, just so that I can keep that army moving. But, you know, plugged up everywhere else. The Japanese can't really commit their navy, because once they do, the Americans are free to set up their supply line. You know, and it's not like there's anything tremendous I want to do. I don't have an invasion or anything I can do. I might be able to conceivably, with airstrikes and something, take this, but I've gotten no edge whatsoever from these guys. Everything's kind of just clogged up and unable to budge at all. Now, eventually, some kind of production situation is going to come into play. Unfortunately, I didn't build up my strategic bombers with the Allies. It wasn't part of my plan. My plan was take Japan out. That's not working. And, you know, so I can't really spike the economic situation. The Axis can if they get the jump right on the naval action, if they get their subs out at the right time, and they find things, you know. And that's the problem with waiting till the last impulse. You may not get anything. You may fail, right? You may also fail to set up your supply line, though, because coming up very shortly, we're going to start seeing rolls that could end the turn. And those could happen at any point. Now, the Allies actually have enough convoys available that they can do combined moves and set up their naval infrastructure and try to force the Japanese to break that up. And that's about all I can hope for at this moment. Unfortunately, of course, the Japanese Navy is powerful enough it can break it up. I can probably split the Japanese Navy into a couple of places and cover both of these. That might be risky, though, because then the U.S. has the capability of challenging one navy altogether. But I really would rather not let these suckers out. And, of course, there's the British Navy available and everything. So there's an interesting dynamic going on. It's just very, very frustrating to see World War II grind to a halt because I can't get anything done. I think we're going to see stuff happen on the naval front of some sort or another. I just don't know quite what it is. Axis get a good turn. One of the advantages of the combined move is lots of airstrikes. For the Germans, what? 5 in a combined move. So by throwing the Navy out, pushing these submarines out, I managed to actually smack up one of the U.S. transports, an important one. Not that there is supply going elsewhere, but now the Allies have to go protect these convoy lines, which they certainly can, but it forces the Brits to do a naval move that maybe they didn't want to do. They could have had them covered, honestly. It was kind of dumb not to have them covered. But anyway, we lost some more convoy shipping due to that. But the biggie is the German airstrikes actually were fairly successful, even given the bad weather. We have rain here. Less airstrikes, but we got more successful ones and managed to actually clean out everything that was kind of off to the edges. And I don't know if I have another headquarters in range down here. I might want to wake up some of these planes. I did the ones over here, but I don't think I have a headquarters near enough. And then over here, the Persian force was also destroyed. The Med is at least in good weather. The Japanese didn't do anything quite as successful. They threw their subs out as well. They didn't get any hits with them. It's hard with the stormy weather. That's the biggest problem. But couldn't do any airstrikes up here with the storms. And there really wasn't a whole hell of a lot for me to do. Mainly I just scattered my subs and saw what would happen. And, you know, I've got, on other turns, I've got a shot at these. But, of course, the U.S. can go in and try to cover them and see what they can do. But it's always going to be this kind of tit-for-tat type thing until it escalates to everything or to a large force trying to wipe out one or the other side's capability. And once they commit their whole force, well, then it's safe to commit your own whole force to whatever the hell you want to do. So, I mean, I'm a little cheered up now because I got some things to happen. It doesn't really matter what they are. Generally, it's, oh shit, I don't want to attack because my odds are too bad. And I made some iffy attacks as well, and they succeeded. But, and it's kind of annoying when you do something and it fails. But it's much worse when you feel like you just can't do anything. Here I was worried that I would not be able to do anything, and then I got a lucky series of rolls, and that feels good. But the problem is that it's so likely that you're not going to be able to do anything, that you're going to be stuck. on the whims of those die rolls for can I flip a unit. And it's because ground combat is so hard in this game. And then not being able to do anything, that's okay. I don't mind a game where I can sit back and say, okay, nobody wants to do anything. What I really hate is the amount of effort I have to do, especially when I start looking at this and trying to count. I've gotten a little better at that. So for the Italians, for example, I had an air point left, so I put it over here, and then I could use that for a rebase or something like that. But that's the kind of thing that you've got to reconcile, is how to keep track of all these different capabilities across several different countries. Now, I've been splitting up to Japan separate from the Germans and Italians, and actually I could probably pretty much do the Italians separate from the German. They're all on their own little sections. It's no longer a situation like it was in Russia, where the Italians were supporting the German attack, and you really wanted to kind of interleave their air power and their armies, and one side would use air power, the other side would use the ground forces. Now everybody's got their own theaters for themselves. It's kind of funny because you get a penalty if you coordinate ground forces with each other, or if you coordinate like a ground strike with another nation's attack, but you get no penalty for trying to flip enemy units. So like, if you can get the Italian Air Force in Russia and the German Air Force defending Italy, that's actually what you really want to do in this game. It's totally twisted, but you want to have multinational combined forces, just because one side can pick the air war, one side can pick the land war in any particular, for any particular turn, and that way you're more powerful in each of the theaters, even though one theater has to take a pause every impulse. Like every other impulse, you switch theaters or whatever. But it really can boost your strength if you can get your forces aligned in some sort of way like that. And I was kind of trying to do that, getting British planes down here, but I'm not on the offensive, so it's not terribly valuable. The Brits and the Americans, for that matter, both took actions to try to do some ASW type work, and also the Brits took a full naval action and just pulled some of their convoys off the line so they don't just lose them. It might be better off having them available. I can't tell for sure how much I need to pump resources through the Arabian Sea, for example. Obviously I have a lot of resources here in India, but the truth of the matter is I have a fair amount of French resources. Oh, no, I don't. Those are Vichy French. Oops. Oh, well. Anyway. I'm also trying to take on convoys out here. I didn't find anything, though, and the U.S. pulled in here to try to protect its convoy as well as searching for the Japanese subs. The Japanese don't have to hunt, though, and if they don't find them, they don't get to hit them. Also over here, not over here. I thought I had some protection here. I probably want to hunt these guys. Dispatch some of the Gibraltar fleet to deal with that. And I was considering sending part of the fleet out here. Problem is I don't have any convoys here. And I actually really do need these. These are the ones pulling my African shipping up. I'm trying to reestablish a partial convoy over here to start getting some resources through, avoiding the North Atlantic subs and hunting down the German subs. I also sent out some British subs over here. I'm going to try to send them somewhere, maybe into the Med, to try to disrupt the Italians. I don't know. But yeah, I ought to take care of these. A little bit of movement. U.S. did a combined move, a little bit of movement over in the Spanish theater. Because you have to pre-plan everything, I don't think I sent any planes up. I really should get some moving over here. But taking that out would be a good idea too. The danger, of course, is if I end up not being able to resupply what's over here because this gets cut, that would be a real problem. I have a convoy over here, but I can't figure out a way to get it anywhere useful. It's really, really tough to keep your lines in place. Even if you're not being contested, it's hard to keep them aligned to your supply needs, and once they start getting contested, it just becomes kind of a nightmare. Yet another facet that you kind of have to, I guess, learn how to play it right in the game. Not so much by the rules, but just, I mean, that's always a burden for me, but just to figure out, you know, what number do I need here? How can I do this without having to look up the rules every time and figure it out, you know, and do a lot of counting? What's my sort of stable state? And I don't know the answer to that. We're moving into a period of this impulse where all the weather's good, so neat things could happen again. Not sure where they're going to happen, though. Like, I'd like to clean out Norway, but Norway is, you know, such a secondary situation compared to Spain or Russia, you know, that it's really tough for me to devote the limited air activity I have to actually take it out. Italy was able to do Persia simply because they don't have much else to do. Because naval battles are such an intense feature in this game, I'm going to jump over, because a lot happened over in the European theater, cover that, and then get to what's going on in the Pacific. The Germans took another combined action, played around with their subs, in some cases leaving them out in danger, in other cases evacuating where they could get away safely. The ones from here, I don't think they were allowed to be here in Buenos Aires. They can't be there unless they're allied officially. Anyway, you know, so many mistakes in this game, who cares? I sent some out hunting some British over in the African area, and I'm not sure. I looked that up in DoD2. DoD3 may be different. But I'm playing whatever happens. In Spain, though, the combined action gave me enough land moves to support the air attacks that I was making, and you can see we took Madrid, and things are pushing further and further downward. It's really looking kind of hopeless, but it's taking a long time. Over here in Russia, nothing could happen. I just don't have the air power anymore to conduct a campaign in Russia. But the Italians took a full land move and started shifting. What they'd like to do is attack into Russia, but this is not easy. They have to position a headquarters here to supply to these towns so that the attack can continue up along the rail line. But that allows them to ignore the British force. Of course, the British force, they can't fully ignore it. It could conceivably come in if they can get sea supply. The alternative would be to march along the water and then engage with the Brits, and I see that as coming to no real effect. Over on the Japanese side, some submarines just sitting out there. They don't really particularly want to engage, but they're willing to risk it. There's not a very big force there, but I took my two naval moves, one in the China Sea, which we're seeing the battle here developing. The Japanese got a 4-point surprise. I could have chosen surface combat, but it's pretty close either way. I have a little bit more air power, I think, proportionally. It's hard to tell. I have my crappiest carriers here, but the Brits don't really have much here either, because it takes them a long time to get carriers filled with planes, or just the planes, out into the Pacific, and they've been building up their carrier force in Europe. And then, again, not my top carriers, but my next set is here in the Marshalls, and I'm expecting to either drive the US away, or if we don't find them, probably sucker the rest of the U.S. carrier force in to see if it can destroy those, And this could just end up in an escalation to a big battle there. We're seeing something closer to the historical reality, which is a slow commitment, not just burning all the oil to try to, get one decisive engagement of the entire Navy. Obviously, the Japanese historically wanted that situation, and it seems to have worked well for them, at least in terms of cutting everything off here in Truk. All right, well, I'll resolve this battle, and it could go several rounds. Who knows? And this was a completely successful attack. Stripped away all the planes. One last one got shot down trying to bomb in, and then took out one carrier. The Brits have no reason to keep the carriers alive in the Pacific, particularly. It's too much of a pain in the ass to get the planes back there. So they lost one battleship damaged, I think 2 carriers down. No, just 1 carrier down. The rest was aborted. I got to figure out how to get it in there. But those are all based in Hong Kong. Now that's basically a useless task force. It can do some small job as cruisers or whatever. The carriers have to pretty much return home to get planes on them if I don't want to transport planes out here. And I really don't have the energy, the transport capacity, whatever, to send things around Africa to get them over here. This is going to be the US's war in the Pacific, it looks like. And it looks like my whole plan has collapsed as the Allies, which is to say, the idea of, hey, let's concentrate on Japan and crack them. Nah, Japan's doing pretty well, actually. Over here, we didn't have a successful discovery, which means the US is going to be pumping those carriers in, and this is going to escalate. We'll see to what degree, but remember, the US still hasn't hooked up Truk. They have to get another boat here, so they may not be able to do. I don't know where they're going to get it from. Do they have one? Better have. Yeah, they've got some convoys here in Hawaii. 1, 2, 3. The problem, of course, is if they send them unsupported, the Japanese can send a couple of ships over there to raid it and take it out. So there's no real guarantee of holding that. But also, if this goes, well, I have 2, so I could actually drop one down here in the Polynesian and one in the Solomons. And, because I have to go this way to avoid getting intercepted on the way in the Marshalls. So this does actually become important. And it's also possible, that the Brits have some extra convoys. They could sail out to New Zealand and the Coral Sea. So the Solomons does become absolutely vital here in this situation. But yeah, if the Japanese choose to take a air action or use, I don't know, they don't have that many carriers here, use most of their air power, they can bomb these British ships a little bit more. I don't know how much value that is, but, it remains an option. And I think that's possible end of turn. Nope. Patch for 3-sided turns, which I think is as accurate as whatever DoD had in it. But it ended up, I think, for maybe the first time having a real effect. The turn ended on the Russians' activation, so there was an extra roll on the 1 than there would be in a normal World in Flames game. But you want that distinguishment because there is the possibility of a truly 3-sided game. We're not really seeing that here. But anyway, during the Russian activation, they actually succeeded in taking a hex back. With the Germans having no air power, well, the Russians don't have, the need to use a lot of their units. So they smacked them back. They're going to have to try to remember to build some defenses up here against the Italians, because now that the Italians have not quite, but almost conquered Persia, there's a real threat to the Russian line there. Might also be possible, I don't know if there's a Persian unit, but the turnaround time on some of these units is just 1 turn. And, well, I can't get resources to build it. So it's not really, I could conceivably build here if I had a sea line. Unfortunately, as you can see, the US is not going to be able to get out a truck anytime soon. And I think some of the connections are barely in existence. So here, through the central Atlantic, we're making it to here. It means there's only 2 resources coming from North America into Europe. Yeah, not just North America, South America too, because some of the oil that I'm counting for the Brits, I think, is coming out of Venezuela. We really need to secure our convoy lines, and they're just not holding together. And that's going to be what kills the Allies, is the inability to keep those convoy lines open. It really is beginning to be a real problem. Since Germany's entered the war with her huge submarine force, these are just getting disrupted all to hell. Italy couldn't disrupt them, not coming out, they couldn't get out of the Med, but now with the Suez open to them, they're able to start screwing around in the Indian Ocean. The Japanese are able to combine with that, and we've really kind of disrupted all of the Western Allies' supply situation, which begins to lead you to the question of, maybe it wasn't such a good idea to say screw you to Russia. Of course, maybe it wasn't such a good idea for Russia to start the Chinese Civil War either, you know. And it's not like Japan has all that much. Japan's got its problems too. They can't handle this partisan here who's holding Chongqing. And more partisans could appear. Japan doesn't have the ground army available to cope with that while they're fighting against the Brits here and against the Russians there. So they're losing some resources and some production capability as well. And that could just start skyrocketing in terms of the cost to Japan. But they do have a fair amount of shipping coming across, including all their oil, I believe. So, they actually don't need this one. I thought they needed this one. But I'm trying to see where the line is. I think the line is actually here, so the East Indian connects to Batavia. And this one actually does connect to Surabaya, but no, I don't think it even makes it. But just owning South China Sea is all they have to worry about. And that's important because it means I don't have to, you know, extend coverage of my supply line quite as far. And of all things, I've got supply here, so this plane is going to be available. Yeah, it looks like this was a fairly successful turn for the Axis. Pushing down in Spain, the only problem. The Russian front, I got to get a whole bunch of planes back over there. As I start the July-August turn here in 44, the Allies get stuck with the initiative, i.e. they rolled the worst, so they're being made to go first. Being made to go first isn't necessarily, generally you do actually want to go first, but there's the advantage of trying to get the benefit on the initiative die roll. Of course, if you never go first with it, I guess it's kind of pointless to have that bonus, and everybody's been kind of taking as late in the turn as they can to try to get or maintain bonuses. The Allies have nothing they want to do navally. They don't have any big offensive campaigns underway anywhere. So going first doesn't really help them much, although they were able to maybe rationalize their defense in Spain a little bit better. But it doesn't help. They don't have that many, they don't have enough pieces to hold a line here. But it's going to force the Germans to move more rapidly, which may be the best they can hope for. By pushing the Germans to have to advance, that means that a regular land action is almost prescribed. Not proscribed, prescribed. Okay, anyway. One thing I did when I started this turn is I found, wow, I left a lot of crap from other turns. Some issues of unflipped counters, some of those subs that had to make their way back through through hostile territories. I had this happen during the reinforcement phase, and then again now, and we actually had one battle, and so some ships and subs they got damaged and did not have a chance to be rebuilt or repaired. Hey, no biggie there. Somewhat more disturbing, because it's not just my fault, well, in my view. I had bombers in place here and a couple other places. This is because I'm trying to follow the sequence of play too much. So I forget some of the stuff that I allocate during, or I'm trying to pre-allocate and keep within these limits and all that crap. There's stuff that I pre-allocate, like, oh, here's a ground strike I'm going to make. In order to try to remember everything that's going on, well, I completely forget not only about launching the air units, they're there now, but I forget about resolving them and then any possibility of any kind of land combat. I did the strikes and figured I'd clean it up. You know, again, there's kind of the, hey, who really cares? You know, it's this worldwide situation. The sequence of play, as long as it's not being exploited, it can be bent, but on the other hand, it's annoying. The scope, and this is why I've never played the Commonwealth, the scope of covering the whole board in the solo game is really painful. Now, if I was playing the Commonwealth, I would have that same situation where I have to deal with, hey, what do I want to have happen on, you know, what do I need to be doing in Europe? What do I need to be doing in the Pacific? And how can I do them both under the same command, you know, under the same set of restrictions? And the U.S. would have the same issue in general, although usually in games that I've played, the U.S. doesn't come into the war when I've played opposed. But the Commonwealth has been involved everywhere. The one thing the Allies kind of did, other than in Spain, was the Brits decided, you know, if I can't clear this out, I'm in trouble. The Italians played some air support in. It ended up a 2-to-1 attack, and the Brits are just screwed. But with additional Italian forces coming, I feel like I had to try to take that. And take it did not work. Alright. The one thing that bugs the crap out of me in the allowable activities is, first of all, the port attacks. You know, you can't do a naval action and do a port attack. Is that big a deal? No, because the way they are in the sequence of play, port attacks come way down here at the beginning of the sequence of play. So your ships have to be in place. So there's not I must do a naval action to get this. The invasions, I'm a little iffy on them, but okay. For a major invasion of Europe, I don't mind an offensive chip being almost a requirement. But I'll tell you the one that really kills me. It's the naval air, which is only unlimited on an air action. If you're doing a naval action, and it's clearly meant to support a naval action, right? If you're doing a naval action, screw you, man. You only get, you know, whatever you get. So like for the Commonwealth, that's 3 air missions total. You can't coordinate your naval air and your naval movement at the same time. And that strikes me as largely ridiculous. Okay, Japan and the Germans both took air moves. Now the Japanese air move didn't do much. You can see I flipped over my headquarters to recover my planes. Tried bombing through here, no real effect. Likewise, the bombing raids up in Russia didn't have any effect. Got some planes out here, did an air raid on Hong Kong. Killed some more, or damaged another ship, killed another old cruiser. It's easier to rebuild them in Britain than to bring them back from Hong Kong, though. So, I mean, it takes longer, but maybe not if I never get the action, you know. Activating to say, hey, I got a couple of ships, you know, to use a combined action to move those couple of ships is really tough. And that's what's happening here. I've got ships that are just stuck out there, unable to do a damn thing because I don't have the activities without taking a naval move where I can move everything everywhere. And they just don't seem worth it. Over here, the Germans moved some of their planes forward. They're really not upgraded enough in terms of air power compared to the Russians to be able to fight there. But I have been pushing planes. This should be recovered. I have been pushing planes towards the Russian border. These guys, just all kind of planes everywhere trying to fly that way. Over here, I threw every goddamn plane I have into the Norway Hex because I'm sick and tired of failures. I'll send like 4 planes in and get no hits. Well, this time I sent 6 in and I got a hit on the first roll. You know, but, and the disadvantage, of course, to that is now I have no planes to upgrade my odds. This is a white bordered unit, so flipping it wasn't that terribly valuable. It's still 6 strength points. I'm facing 14, 24, 27. If I could have put a plane in there, I could get it up to 5-1 with the +1, but since I threw everything in an act of frustration, I actually probably have something. This could give me a couple points. That's carrier based though. This guy might be able to make it there. He's got 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You know what? I'm gonna rebase him up here so that I can get those odds. Because I took an air move, so I have I can move as much air as I like. Over here, we drove the Brits out of the Bay of Biscay. Their shipping capabilities there. I could have done some interception. I had a plane here. It knocked out a couple of German planes. I forgot about the fact that I can intercept at any point. With these guys, of course, they only get half their movement point, but half of 20 movement points is enough to get me out here to the 3 box. So I probably should have done that, and but as it is, we lost, oh geez, I don't know, I think 8 of my convoy points. That's a lot of shipping going down. In Spain, hits all over, or strikes all over the place, just a couple of hits. But the Allies don't have headquarters near there. Their headquarters are down here, so nothing's going to flip over and get particularly strong. Unflipped some of my planes, but these guys over here I couldn't. I had to really be careful because I'm pretty much using up all my air capacity in terms of basing capacity. Unlike Advanced Third Reich, the Third Reich system, whatever, there's no air bases, nothing I can use. I can use headquarters just to base an extra plane. But basically this fighter had to flee so that I had room to return planes to base. And the Italians, what did they do? They're trying to creep here. I don't know what my chances of actually supplying things are. I think as long as I get the headquarters here, I've got supply to these, and then I can run it up from there and start capturing stuff there. And that's going to start hosing Russia even further. You know, they just can't afford to lose stuff. I didn't recover. Oh no, I did recover some of my planes up here. So I've got enough for another couple of strikes during regular moves if I want to. This, of course, failed. I have no real hope of that succeeding. But, you know, it's worth these are cheap. That's 1/5 of an oil. You know, it's worth spending that on a chance that I can get something. If I succeed in flipping one of the 2 units, I might send something like a carrier force to go, or a carrier, one carrier, to go handle that, or a ground strike, you know, try to launch something from here or something if I've got a plane that's a long enough range. But other than that, I don't know. You know, this is one of those situations, it's kind of funny, where if I was playing with other people, somebody would have probably reminded me, hey, you can intercept, you know, and if it wasn't me doing it, I might have reminded them. It's not like I'm the only idiot. It's just that when you're tied up in something, sometimes you forget things like that. One other thing I forgot to mention, got some V1 rockets moving into place. I actually have 2 of them stacked there. We'll see how they work. I don't expect much of them. I think I probably wasted money on them because resources are the problem that Britain's facing. And if I bomb London, which is all I can reach with these, they only have a range of, they only have a range of 2. Let's bring them to Calais. If I bomb London with them, they're just not gonna, you know, I think they can, between the 2 of them, I think they can hurt 1 production point. Well, these things cost a production point each to make. they're not expensive, but it's not the factories that I've weakened in Britain. If I got some strategic bombing going, etc., I could knock out, you know, factories north of London and use the rockets as an additional force. I really had to do something with these Irish. I don't know what they're up to here. I keep forgetting about them. I actually have enough units there. I can probably take Dublin, which is another British factory. Allies get involved in a lot of ASW. Some over here. We hit the Germans over here. Guess we didn't find them there. They might want to get out of there, but there's a good chance they get caught if they try to run. That's the problem. Oh. So, went after some Italian shipping here that's pretty unimportant. Didn't find it. But yeah, you know, trying to cut down on the losses we're taking. The thing is, we destroyed one German sub, a couple more of their planes. We were able to get an air-to-air combat here, which was nice. But otherwise, most of the losses are just things going into the damage box. And actually, you know, some of the Brits went in there too. I think they lost a battleship into the damage box from over there. Oh, no, maybe it was just an abort. Anyway, you know, there's a cost to anything you do here. Axis side of the impulse over on the Japanese side. Fleet came out to try to challenge this. Now, there, you know, I have some possibility of taking Truk. I have a force ready to invade. There's a heavy force here. I'd have to succeed in a ground strike to have any chance at all, really. And with the rain, it doesn't seem like the time to do it. Rain is good this time of year. So I went out to try to hunt the fleet here. Now, here's what's interesting. The Americans are probably going to send the rest of their fleet to try to challenge this. That means the Japanese are going to increase their fleet. We're going to have multiple task forces patrolling around here in the Marshalls. And if the Japanese commit everything, then the U.S. can cut their supply line around the back, which is something we got to try to keep in mind, but I am easily distracted. Not much happening over on the Russian front, except the Italians slipping around behind. They're in supply from this guy. Once they hook that up, then they can run it along the rail lines to the different towns. I think this is what's going to collapse the Russian front. They're going to have to, you know, they're losing resources in a factory if they're not careful. If they get a build sometime soon before the Italians sneak up completely, they'll be able to defend that, but they were caught napping there. Over here, Italians pushing through North Africa, but the biggie is, well, Norway fell, but the biggie is that Spain is really collapsing. There's just nothing that can be done about it. The forces have been wiped out. Good airstrikes in the combined move, in addition to some damage that had already been done. We just plowed forward. Spaniards tried to defend with their own air, but they really just couldn't do much. You know, reducing, I don't know, 10 to 1 odds to 5 to 1 or something like that. Sounds great, but it ended up causing some flips that I wasn't expecting, that's all. Which the Germans, if they have a headquarters up there, would want to recover. I don't think they have one close enough to the line, though. They've been having trouble getting them through the mountains. Back to storms in the northern monsoon. The Russians actually had an answer. They had some rail moves, pulled some air down. They've got some cav moving down that way. They can defend that front. And the Italians end up kind of bottled up in Persia without anywhere to go, I think. I mean, they'll try, but it's going to be real tough. The one thing they have in there to their advantage is they have some planes available that they can try to leverage, but there's a good Russian fighter, a really good Russian fighter there to say, "Nyet." The situation in the Pacific is really terrible for the Allies. Because there's a storm and not just rain, my carriers are useless. And I don't have a lot of capital ships available. Neither here nor over here. The Japanese sent a fair number out. There's a good chance whatever I send out is going to get hammered. On the other hand, excuse me for these hiccups, yeah, that's fucking civil of me, right? Yeah, I made a joke and I get him back. I need to establish my convoy route, but the chance of the turn ending right here is pretty much nothing. So I think I actually don't want to launch my ships. The question is whether I want to take an activation, get these ships back out of there. Well, doing that makes this convoy pretty much toast, unless I pull it out as well. This is a tough call, and it's not like there's a hell of a lot I can do over here in Spain. In fact, I think I'm cut off out of supply with my New York militia. These guys are cut out of supply. This is just terrible everywhere. And I don't know what I'm going to do. Around to the Axis. Asia's still quiet. The Japanese shot up the U.S. forces here. They stayed in, risking a second round. Didn't happen. The storm made that fairly unlikely. Over here, other than movement eastward, try to deal with Russia somehow. Wow, Spain's just collapsing here. No need to call Portugal in. I'd rather not do it. I'm going to be able to ship the resource out, which is really all I really need it for. They got a crappy ship, but I don't want that. And this reminds me of Korea, you know, except that there's not going to be any pushback. The German army is better than whatever the Allies could throw in there. And if you look, you can see the losses accumulating here. Russia finishes off the impulse without a hell of a lot to do, just pushing this cav further. The Allies, the weather stays the same. Start establishing their convoy route for Truk, which is going to force the Japanese to respond. And basically, the way I see it is, chances are it's going to fall to chance whether or not the Americans can keep supplies up running through here. We did make a more aggressive stance, though. Sailed a fleet out of England here into the North Atlantic, another fleet into the Bay of Biscay, and set up some additional convoy routes out here. Not sure I have anything I terribly want to do with this. It's not sufficient to haul all the resources I have. I keep forgetting and thinking I've got the French resources in West Africa. I don't. So I gotta kind of look. South Africa has a decent amount, and I'm hauling 5 or more around the African coast. Well, only 5, but do I actually have them? 1, 2. Can't believe Rhodesia doesn't have any. Oh, up here in northern Rhodesia. 3, 4. I can use the Belgian one. But the rails don't cut anywhere else. But I do have supplies here. If there's anything in Tanganyika, doesn't look like it. Madagascar doesn't seem to have any. Thought they did. So I think I'm getting like 4 out of Africa, which is fine. Because I have this additional one that I can send to the central Atlantic. But I do have to try to charge up the British economy a little bit. I've been eating up my oil and I'm almost out. You know, if I can't get resources from America beyond what I'm getting, I'm not going to be able to overload that pipeline with oil as well. So that's kind of a concern. Spain's a lost cause, but I did drop another a garrison into Gibraltar. I really have nothing else I can cover here because Bradley here is out of supply. These Spanish are going to get overrun. It's just, you know, it's over there. In some ways, I should be saying, you know, it's just over. But I'm kind of curious because I think that the Allies can still stalemate the Axis under these conditions. You know, as bad as things are, it feels like I can still outproduce Japan. I can't outproduce Germany, though, and that's the danger. The danger is Germany and or Mexico coming up or whatever. Those are the things I really have to worry about. Germany has a very, very powerful economy right now. They start building their strategic bombers. They don't have a whole hell of a lot, but they should be able to cripple England completely. That's my counting on it, and the rockets when they come. Of course, the U.S. is eventually going to just get an A-bomb, and that might cause some issues. It doesn't cause surrender, though. There's no national morale in the WIF games, which I find kind of a major flaw to them. Not that historically anybody just surrendered except Italy, who has their own special surrender rules, and France, who has their own special surrender rules. But there's a limit to what any nation can survive. And, you know, Japan did surrender without fighting to the last drop of blood. They probably would have gone on if it weren't for the atomic bombs. But still, there's some point at which the nation will just say, that's it. And either, you know, the leadership will actually surrender, as in the case of Japan, or, you know, the country will turn so against the leadership that they will kill them off, which probably could have happened in Germany. Okay, trying to get the zoom fixed here. Right. So the Japanese spread out hunting down the U.S. convoys. They failed. You can see the convoy route still exists, actually a double route. Yeah, the crux is right here at the Solomons. I didn't find anything, though. The Germans had a lot more effect, though. They sallied out. I did a combined move and then screwed up, moved a whole bunch of pieces down here, and then I said, screw it, man, you know, I can't undo those movements, and it's not that big a deal. I mean, I was set up for the attack pretty well. I would have been able to make that, but the advance across here I probably wouldn't have been able to make. But the German subs got caught coming out, and they ended up sinking the convoy and then not being found. The Italians also did a combined move, and they followed the rules with theirs. But they kind of screwed the pooch. They came out to fight the British fleet, succeeded in having the British fleet find their convoy, sink it, and then run away. So everything the Brits wanted to do got done. The Germans, or the Italians over here, are out of supply and unable to proceed with the attack that they wanted to make here, and this guy couldn't move. And anything else here of any interest? I don't know. I don't know why there's an Italian convoy out. Oh, it was pulling goods out of South America, and I don't know what to do with it. But yeah, Bradley went down here, and there's actually some Canadians down here that I forgot about. Something else I forgot about, though, was the Americans over here. I forgot to make a roll, so they went looking for the sub. They failed to find it, but it found the convoy and sank the U.S. convoy there. So similar situation to what happened here. Similar situation to what happened here, where the attempts to defend the sea zones and the convoys within them have triggered successful hits on those. Such is life. An interesting interplay went on with the impulse track here. The Russians, the Western Allies kind of asked the Russians, hey, can you, you know, pass to increase the chances that the turn ends while we have the supply route going here? And the Russians said, screw you, you know? The reasoning behind that is not simply because the Russians are pissed at the Western Allies, which I'm sure they are at this, you know, mighty Russia is awfully tiny right now, but also the longer that the war goes, the more chance Russia has of extending themselves. And they don't feel like their survival is really at risk. They actually feel like the Western Allies can win this. Or will not be defeated. So then the question comes down to, okay, can Russia recover? And the only way I can see that happening is in a very, very long game. So they want to delay the game longer here by keeping the U.S. out of supply. And talking about that supply route, there's something kind of interesting that, you know, thinking about what's going on, this luck factor in terms of establishing it and catching it. You can imagine convoys trying to slip in to sneak fuel into there in sufficient quantity to get them out. And that's what's kind of happening here, is how much of that can be sunk. The only problem is, theoretically, some of it is going to get through each turn. So eventually there would be enough supplies to get out of there over time. But you can kind of build up the narrative of what's happening there. And it's kind of exciting, even if from a gameplay point of view, it feels really cheesy to be, you know, relying this much on luck in a lot of ways. It actually probably is accurate as well, that it comes down to how much luck do you have in setting up a convoy that can get through. Western Allies pushed out a bunch of ships on anti-sub duty, and then the U.S. also made a punch here now, and we're also extending as many convoys. There was one over here. Now the Japanese reaction was to do anti-convoy work as much as they can. You know, raiders here. I even sent raiders here, and these were successful. Unloaded carriers, because they have some anti-ship capability, and they took down a U.S. convoy. But this big battle is going to happen. We've got a 7-point surprise in favor of the Japanese. It's tough to find anything in the stormy weather. They had to roll a 1 to get in there. And they're going to target the convoy, a couple protecting carriers, a couple heavy ships. But I'm able to bring everything into play. So the U.S. is going to get pretty heavily disrupted there. The thing is, though, there's a U.S. line coming here, which is unlimited oil. There's a line I can't. Now I can disrupt that. There's a line I essentially can't disrupt unless the weather clears, because my remaining ship is too slow to find them, and the planes are unable to see them, which runs here. But there's only one, make it 2 oil coming from that source, which means the whole force won't be ready to move. I could unflip some of it and then leave, you know, either leave or leave the whole force there, trying to wait and see if I can unflip all of it. Not sure why I didn't do a port attack here. I probably should have. I think I'll resolve that first. Some things I'm willing to correct, you know, things that favor the Axis, I think. I don't know. Nah, it's just because I get so entranced into one facet of the game that I forget the other things I should be doing. These guys were present. These guys were not, to be able to port attack Honolulu. And I see no reason why I wouldn't want to do that. Really at all. I also might want to do a port attack here in the Solomons, to tell you the truth. Although that one, I have a lot less firepower available. We have a couple bombers. That could go very badly for me against all the gunfire that's there. But if those guys are going to escape, I kind of want to blow them up. It's kind of exciting seeing these battles happening without any air power in play. The Japanese managed to catch these guys with big surprise. They've wiped them out. Now, that doesn't mean all destroyed. As a matter of fact, I think the only ship that was destroyed was a Japanese light cruiser. But then both sides found each other with good rolls, so everything's present, and we got the U.S. battle wagons that are remaining, but there's a fairly heavier Japanese presence, and this is what's going to be the U.S.'s problem, is that Japan has enough dominating naval power, as long as they can keep these guys bottled up, that that the U.S. is simply not able to challenge them in sort of that all-out battle. So all they have to hope for is to be able to get the supplies they need to get through. Now, once these are released, if they can get out, the U.S. has fairly close parity to what the Japanese have on the field with their production and everything. It should be pretty close, but getting these guys trapped was horrible. And here we have all these aircraft carriers engaged in a surface combat. But what I wanted to look at was the results. So the Japanese have a significantly larger fleet in terms of gun power. But they also have a larger fleet in terms of how many ships they have available, so they take more damage. So in total, the results were 3 destroyed, 1 damaged, 3 aborted for the Americans, and 2-2-3 for the Japanese. And you can see they both come out to 7 in terms of what ships go. And it becomes kind of difficult, or it becomes kind of painful, what to choose to hit. Because if you take your weaker ships, they're going to die, or they're going to suffer the worst results. But if you take your heavier ships, say as a destroyed result, they're going to end up in the damage box, and they end up costing you a lot to repair. Where it might be cheaper to destroy a weaker ship and go through the 2 build phases with it. Of course, it takes forever to get it back on the board. With the damaged results, if you take that against a heavy ship, you're taking a heavy ship out of the line. And if you take it against a light ship, well, you might be repairing it. So in general, you have these really interesting choices, and it's usually the person receiving the damage, the person whose fleet it is, who gets to decide what takes the damage. So you have, these interesting calls. How long do you want to stick around and fight and stuff like that? With no convoy in place and no hope of one getting there, the U.S. probably doesn't really care too much about staying in this space unless they think they can win the fight. So they're probably going to reduce their losses. What about the Japanese? Do they want to cull this U.S. fleet to do a lot of damage to it? Probably, because they have... Well, see, the problem is, if this line holds, and it may well, the U.S. is out of there soon. Okay, I wanted to zoom in. Germans took an air action. I did all of it except for this, which I forgot about. I'm going to do a strategic bombing. Now, the Brits have pulled all their air cover out of Britain, actually, because the Germans, although they've been aligning things, it's mainly fighters out there, and I'm not too worried. But this turn, I started moving some sea-based air, or some seaplanes that actually have some strategic bombing capability, and so there's some danger coming forward. But anyway, I'm going to try bombing London. Now, these are V1s. They can be intercepted, and their range is only 2 hexes, so boink, boink. This is about all they're good for. I have 3 of them. I kind of wanted to do it, and they're destroyed, obviously, when they're used. I kind of wanted to do it just because I don't want, V2s and V3s to start showing up without anything. So let's see what strategic bombing does for me. What I'd love to have done was be able to reach their oil reserves or some of their resource hexes, but I can't hit those because of the range. So I had like 3 strategic bombing factors. I don't want to use both of these. I'll just use the 2.1. Who knows? So 3 strategic bombing factors on an 8, 9, or 10. I'm able to cost a production point. and I don't get it. So you can see those suckers aren't really worth building. For Italy, they attempted an invasion of Malta, and they took out the fighter cover there, but it was only like a 4-to-1 attack, and they didn't get in. Even with the +1 and such not, they destroyed the notional unit, but they were destroyed in addition, so no help. They were able to get some bombardment over here. That means no real movement towards Gibraltar. I need to get planes down there and soften the target up. Strangely enough, Gibraltar isn't a fort in this. You have to build the fortifications for Gibraltar. I didn't realize, I figured in 39 they would have been built. I'm not sure before that, but anyway. My bad, you know. I didn't spend points building up Gibraltar. I don't know how much it terribly matters. My ability to contest the Mediterranean is sorely limited, and I probably would be better off not doing so at this point. It would be terrible if Gibraltar fell this turn because these British ships are unflipped. So that's bad. Hey, one more thing we ought to check. End of turn check. 1 through 3. Nope. So we get at least one more impulse, a Russian one. Russia again tries to screw the US and Brits over by moving a piece instead of passing. You're like, well, we still got something we want to do. No new partisan. Oh, the turn ended. So the US supply line into Truk works. There would have also been the partial supply line here, but again, there's only 2 oil there. That would only be 10 of the ships. Yeah, as it stands, the US can get all their ships built, and this is where we stop for the turn and we build new units. Yeah, we move into the autumn of 44, and Britain's screwed. They didn't even take all their builds. They're down to 5 oil because they don't have any connection, and they've been eating into it, both refreshing their units, but also in this case they needed it for production. So they spent, I think they spent about 5 of their oil for production purposes this turn, but they're really falling behind. On the bright side, the US was able to use the Canadian production and get their own oil and save some of their own oil, which, you know, oil is more important than resources. So over here we have the connection, so the US main fleet is available. All the carriers, some of them have planes on them, I swear, don't they? No, they're all looking for planes. Wow. Yeah, I knew some of them had no planes, but yeah, that's pretty painful. So those are all going to have to head back. I've got a nice carrier group here. I have some battle wagons here. Built a whole bunch more. One of the big things with what's happening, though, if we look at the production totals, people aren't really building a lot of stuff for the most part. Obviously, the Commonwealth, but you know, even the U.S., it doesn't look like a lot of different things because they're building a ton of ships, and ships are not cheap. You feel like you're not getting much when you put a big stack of ships on because, one, you don't get them right away. In this case, we're repairing damaged ones, so at least they come in a couple of turns. That's not too bad, I guess. But, you know, they're like $3-4 bucks each for the capital ships, which, again, isn't that bad. I mean, infantry are 3, so, you know. But you just feel like you don't, I don't know, somehow the ships are so expendable and so quickly destroyed in a way that your offensive troops don't feel like they are. Although, I don't know, the U.S. commitment in Spain dissolved pretty quickly. But things over here feel pretty static. Once you get troops somewhere, they kind of seem to stay there until something horrible happens. Anyway, we'll move into the autumn. Weather's going to start getting worse, especially in Russia. Russians building more planes and should be able to get enough to stop the Italians. If the Italians get this, that's going to be annoying. So I'm hoping to get kind of the jump there. A whole bunch of stuff like that. And we'll send this one up.